And we'll get started with the first one if we could, Tim. Somebody's asked, as an academic, have you ever watched porn for research purposes? And if so, how does that sort of fit in with your faith?
I haven't, because I only read the research analyses of pornography. So I haven't watched for the very precise reason that it is so seductive on your brain. And I don't want to take that chance. So even if it accidentally comes up, I don't follow it through. Which is very difficult to not accidentally land on the page when you're researching orgasm or something. So it's real. I mean, I'm like putting on like different types of vaginal and clitoral orgasm. No, not that, I want the academic papers. So, no, I don't.
I was researching kneeling before the Lord for images of somebody kneeling, and I'm pretty sure Dave Whedon's probably going to ask some questions at some stage with the filters here because it was just, it's very difficult to avoid it. So in that sense, with the experience that you've had and meeting with people and hearing it, what are good things we can put in place to help us in this sexually saturated society?
Very quickly on this, when it comes to pornography, we can be proactive and reactive. The proactive thing is we can have filters and we can have accountability software. Filters and accountability software, you probably know, one of the best sites are Covenant Eyes. And what's that, XXX Church. So those two are probably the best and the cheapest also. There's a whole lot. If anyone wants more information on that, feel free to email me and I'm happy to send you that. So that's the proactive, the sort of being proactive. The other thing about being proactive is educating children. We have to start preparing our children now before they go to primary school, what to do if somebody shows them porn. So I'm going to very quickly give you just 4 stages of what I tell little ones and I tell parents of little ones. Firstly, what is porn? They need to know. It's sad that they need to know, but they need to know because somebody might show them, very likely will show them. Just that if somebody shows you pictures of people who are naked or doing something that makes you go ew and feel uncomfortable, because seeing sexual imagery brings about a body reaction. It's not a sexual reaction, but kids will feel a body reaction. And if you haven't told them that, it can be really frightening for children. So we need to teach them that. If somebody shows you something, naked people doing things, and you're feeling like ew and uncomfortable, then first thing to do is say, I don't like this, I don't want to see it. So it's sort of name it and shame it. Second thing is run away. Remember, we are talking to little kids. Older kids, you say, just go away. If it's a little kid, run away. Third, go talk to someone. If you're in school, talk to a teacher. If you're at home, talk to mom and dad. Because it's very important that those feelings and images be immediately discussed. And then we say, think of something else you can do. Think about something else. Sing a song, little child. Sing a song, play with your dog, go do something, read a book. Bring that control brain and think about something else. 4 steps you can teach your children. This is one of the things we are writing in the primary school book.
Fantastic. Are there any other questions specifically on porn at the moment? Because we don't have any more coming through here. Is that right, Tim? And I'm happy to take them from the floor. I'd have plenty, but I do believe we might just want to be moving on anyway. So if there's nothing, yeah, great. The first question sort of looking towards gender, and this one's particularly on gender identity, is how much of a role do psychological and physical experiences such as like abuse or bullying as a child right through adulthood, particularly with our plasticity of our brains, affect identity dysphoria?
The correct word is gender dysphoria. So gender dysphoria or sexual identity problems, we have very little research on it. Very little. The little bit of research that's been done says that male and female brains of people who are transgendered and completely transitioned, their brains are different from the brains of people who haven't, obviously, because, they've transitioned. They've been taking hormones of the other sex. They've been living the life of the other sex. So you put neuroplasticity plus all the hormones. And so there's very little that tells us that there's anything that's biologically linked. Is there any evidence of like abuse or childhood, poor parenting or family? Nothing definite. So the reality is we are at a stage when we really don't know when it comes to gender dysphoria, gender identity concerns. When it comes to same-sex sexuality, there is a lot more research. There's some research, as I told you, on maybe biologically innate desires, but there's just as much research on the environmental factors that when you look at people who are same-sex behavior, same-sex attracted, there's a higher proportion of childhood sexual abuse and poor parenting. So there is an environmental, so it's nature and nurture together.
We had to race through quite a lot of content when you were presenting. You were particularly careful to make sure that we used the correct terminology just then. Can you maybe explain a little bit more why you're so careful with that?
Because we need to understand what we are reading and what the world is saying. You know, the papers and the newspapers are full of false statistics and false wording. You will hear things like 10% of the children in school are homosexual. Nonsense. But if you ask a question like asking teenagers, have you ever had attraction towards somebody of the same sex? About 10% say yes. Like, we have sexualized friendships. And whereas when we were young, remember that was before the dinosaurs, when we were teenagers, we would have, you know, a little crush on another girl, and that was considered, I can't remember what the word it was in Sri Lanka, but it was kind of cute. You sort of had a crush on another girl, and then you grew out of it, and that was best friends. And nobody considered it. But here, if that ever happens, that's a lesbian feeling. Do you see how we have sexualized it? And so we need to be really careful about that, because that's a terminology that's being used. You know, it's a very high statistic, very high transgender statistic, untrue. So we need to know what transgender is. We need to understand that gender identity is that where your brain and your body are not in sync. And then people talk of sexual identity, and that has to do with same-sex sexuality. And am I lesbian, gay, bisexual, fluid? So I know we are getting our brain around this, but just try and sort of be clear as to what these are.
And this question might come into that a little bit, this next one, which asks about particularly adults these days wanting to give young children the choice. I mean, I even heard 4 times the number of people coming into Westmead Hospital with kids as young as 4 about their sexuality or their gender identity. It actually confuses them, this person's suggesting, about the way they have actually been made when they seem too young to be confronted with the sexual preferences that adults are presenting them with. Are these just lies? And I guess also from a parent's perspective, how is it that we can best be responding when this is being communicated to our children as well?
Yeah, which is very important question, and very important because we have children with very malleable brains. Now, just a couple of stories. And a little grandmother, bless her heart, after a women's talk I did, came up to me and said her 6-year-old granddaughter came home from school and said, I think I'm a pansexual. You know? What's a pansexual? A pansexual basically means, you know what? I think I love men and women and transgendered and everybody. And I'll love men today and women tomorrow. And you're 6. You're supposed to love everybody and different people every day. Or a 12-year-old who comes up to me after a talk I did and says, I don't feel desire. I think I'm asexual, aren't I? You're 12. You haven't even started menstruating. Why are you worried about desire? Or 14-year-old, I like boys. I'm friends with boys and I'm friends with girls. Oh, I guess I'm going to grow up to be bisexual. We have sexualized our kids' friendships with these malleable brains. What can you do with it as parents? Your responsibility to start talking early. You cannot leave it to the schools. You dare not leave it to the schools. And bless the hearts of churches who are trying to help. But they can't do it all. It is a parent, an auntie, a grandparent. The home is where they learn, which is why in our primary school book, we have one book that says, who am I? The gender question, which clearly states to your children talking about created male and female with clear genital differences. And that you be proud of being a boy, being a girl. What does it mean? And the fact that just because a little girl likes to do boy things doesn't make her a boy. The little girl who likes to play mechanics with dad and likes to play soccer, and that doesn't make her a boy. And a little boy who likes to maybe play the harp and dance in the street, half-naked, oh, that was King David. But anyway, I mean, doesn't make him a girl. Because that's what the world will say. Oh, you are such a girly boy, you must be a girl. So we need to be clearly talking to our children very early. You know who's embarrassed in this? You, not the child. You need to teach your children firstly the right words for their genitals, for goodness sake. Your daughters have vulvas and vaginas and clitoris. Maybe you don't want to tell a 3-year-old she has a clitoris, you can't even find it anyway. But the reality is, don't be afraid of the right terms. Your daughter doesn't have a vagina or a front bottom. Your sons, and these are words that kids have told me, your sons have penis and scrotum. Get that clear. Not Dick, Willie, or Kevin. Very clear. You need the words very clearly for a couple of reasons, which is really serious. You need to give children today a terminology that they can talk to you with. Because if something happens in school, they see porn, somebody grooms them, somebody sexual abuse. They need to be able to come and tell you, somebody touched me in my genitals. I'll tell you a story which is really frightening, which is a true, where a little girl, the parents taught her, you got bickies, genitals. When she started saying, Uncle so-and-so and I were eating bickies, they didn't get the thing about abuse for a long time. Because you need to give today kids a language that they can talk to you with. And you, as parents, aunties, uncles, you are the ones who can do it.
In an over-sexualized culture, as Christians who want to, and you mentioned this at the beginning of your talk, speak of sexuality in a positive way, how is it that, and we think about, some people might say they're your dirty parts or your private parts. How is it that we can speak and teach children in that respect about their parts? And even for all of us, how is it that we speak in a positive fashion about sex and sexuality in such a way that doesn't glorify it, but keeps its place in where God has put it?
The thing is, you just talk about the body as beautiful. And you say we've all got beautiful bits of our body, and there's, we all have legs and hands and heads and things. But there's one part of the body that's very special, because God created it for a special job. And therefore, it is something that's very special and very private. And you talk about good touch. You talk about, only mommy and daddy when they're bathing you, or when you go to see a doctor with mommy and daddy there. This one, some people call it the bikini bits, the swimwear bits, the bits that are covered by the swimwear. You can use whatever term you want and say these are special parts. God gave it to you because God gave man, woman, mommy, daddy this special job of making you with this. And therefore it's really, really special. It's better to go with that glorified over special but never make them feel dirty about it. And this sort of ties in with if you find a little child touching their genitals, and look, kids, little ones who are touching their genitals have just discovered something that feels good. Especially a boy. It's hanging around. He touches it and it feels good. Look, if it felt good for you to rub your nose, you'll all be sitting here rubbing your nose. But it doesn't feel very good. So, that's the reality. So, for kids who are touching their genitals, it is not a sexual act. It's a pleasure act. because genitals are made to feel good. So you must be very careful not to say, don't do that, dirty, don't touch down there. But rather to say, again, like we said, these are special parts of your body. They are not toys to be played with. God gave it to you for a special thing. You know why kids touch their genitals? I don't even use the word masturbation. Why they touch their genitals? Most of the time they're bored. They're bored. They don't have anything to do.
I've got a 4-year-old son, yeah.
You've got to give them something to do, with their hand, or distract them, or tell them if you feel like doing it, come and tell me and we'll do something together.
Even when How to Train Your Dinosaur's on, Dragon's on, a few, obviously with some of the things in a society that we're in now, and with the way that people, there's quite a lot of heat when you might present some of these things. For you, what resistance do you face from the LGBTQIA community, and what evidence research do they have to support their particular view at this time?
Well, you see, there's research, statistics, lifestyle, what do they say, something, and statistics. So you can pick one research. They'll pick one research and say 10% of the population are gay and lesbian. But the best research, we can counter it with better research. Now, if anyone really wants a really good paper that has just come out yesterday from a Professor Patrick Parkinson, who's a professor of law in the Sydney Law School, critiquing the Safe Schools program, excellent paper. Feel free to email me. He has given me permission to send it out to anyone. Now, the point is that, people will criticize, because remember what I said, if you do not affirm and agree with people and go even further to celebrate with them the behavior, you will be called on as hate speech. I mean, we've heard it. We've heard it from politicians. If you don't agree with me, you hate me. And it's hate speech. I've been called the show pony of the Anglican Church. I don't mind being a show pony. And some other interesting things. But the reality is that if we are going to stand up for the Lord Jesus Christ, we worship a God who went to the cross. He didn't win a popularity contest, and we shouldn't expect to win one either.
And so this next question taps into that. As a Christian surrounded by a lot of non-Christian, openly, let's say, transgendered people, what is the best way for us to be a witness to them, be compassionate and walking with them?
Okay, so let me just take a hypothetical that somebody walks in here and, is cross-dressing. Let's just assume. One of the first things you can do is just meet them. I say meet them at their point of need. Why have they walked in here? Maybe they're just trying to challenge you to see whether you're going to freak. So don't freak. Just go up and say welcome and hello and, what's your name? Then they'll test you and say, I am a Z. I'm not a he or a she, because remember the pronouns become, how would you know, maybe some of you don't know, that transgendered people today are very particular about pronouns. So if you don't want to be he or a she, you are a they or a Z. And so if somebody comes in and says, I want to be addressed as a Z, at the beginning you go, okay, you're a Z, so you're a dinosaur, whatever. You just accept it and meet them at that point. Because the chances are they're either very angry or they're depressed or there's something. So just meet them and care for them and sit with them and love them. Show that as a Christian you are capable of loving even when you don't agree. So that is the first witness. And then, if the person is actually struggling with something, if it's a Christian who's same-sex attracted, if it's a person who's struggling with these gender feelings, then you befriend them and share of yourself with them. I mean, you don't do that the first time, but once you've sort of been with them, you've got to know them a bit, then tell them what God's done in your life. How, as a sinner, God has saved you. And that's a wonderful witness. So first meet them at their point of need, then share your witness, then read the gospel with them. So, then you read the gospel and leave it to the Holy Spirit to do the rest. So it's, remember, like in the gospel, when Paul was writing, I think to, I don't know, Ephesians, one of the guys, one of the churches, he said, Corinth, he said, someone planted, somebody else watered, but it's God who makes it grow. So you do the planting, and you do the watering, and watch God make it grow, and pray for the person. It's the best we can do.
It is a genuine question people have. They want to be loving, but at the same time still not affirm. And so these next couple of questions tap into that really well. What if, let's say, a gay friend who's recently started a same-sex relationship comes to you and you've learnt this? How could you respond to news of their relationship in a compassionate way, but not celebrating sin? What's a better way than saying, say, congratulations or something like that?
You can... couple of things. Firstly is to not affirm the behavior, but affirm their need for intimacy. And so to say something, I'm just speaking hypothetically, to recognize the fact that I can understand why being same-sex attracted, you would want the intimacy, because we are all made with that longing for intimate relationships. But that intimate relationship doesn't have to necessarily be sexual. You can have intimate friendships like you and I are friends. Like, I love you very dearly, but we're not having sex. So you can have intimacy. So discuss the difference between intimacy and sexuality. Why should we congratulate? You can skip the congratulations. So you have to be a witness. That compassion has to be very clearly based on the conviction of your belief. And so maybe you lose a friend. Maybe your friend would step back and think, you know what? He understands my need for intimacy, even when he doesn't agree with my behavior. So be fearless in speaking the truth with love. It's very circumstantial. My dearest friends are same homosexual, transgendered, atheists. Comes with the territory of being a sexologist. They know I'm a Christian, but they know I love them dearly. There's one guy who, when he has a problem, he'll email or ring me and say, pray for me. He's a practicing homosexual atheist. But he says he values my prayers, and I do pray for him. And so, you see, there is that ability to maintain an intimate friendship without acknowledging, without necessarily agreeing and celebrating a behavior. Not easy.
That can be very hard, particularly when, as we've identified in our cultural worldview, that people's very identity is tied to their sexuality. How do you respond to somebody who would say, well, you are rejecting me, you are actually not just rejecting my beliefs, but you're rejecting the very person I am?
Then you talk about personhood. Beautiful entree to talk about personhood and about where people find their identity, and invite them to find their identity in something that doesn't depend on body or anything else, but in a wonderful freedom of an identity in Christ. And talk about true freedom of not having to depend on anything in the world, but a freedom that gives us that true joy of belonging to Christ. Wonderful opportunity. Not always easy. You may lose a friend, but you've got to stand up and speak in love, always in love, but speak to your conviction.
With the potential of a plebiscite, same-sex marriage coming more and more on the cards, this question is one that I think a lot of people are asking. Let's say if my daughter is gay and chooses to marry her partner, should I attend, or let's just say a very good friend of mine even, should I attend their marriage, and how can I actually love them in this situation?
Yeah, I will tell you what I would do, or that's the best I can do. That if a very good friend of mine, and they're probably all, quite a few of them, not really, most of them say they don't want to get married because they don't want to have one partner. They like having that option to move on. But if one of my dear friends was to get married, and we've discussed this with this very dear friend of mine, we've talked about it, and he said, would you come? I said, look, I can't stand with you and affirm and bless a relationship that I do not believe in. Because if marriage is one man, one woman before God making pledges for life, anything else is redefining it into something that is not, and therefore I cannot bless you in that situation. And I want to bless you because I pray for you every day, and I pray for your soul. But I want you, I bless you, and I pray for you. So I can't be in a situation where I can't bless your relationship. But if you want me to come and, just be socially and meet this person you're marrying later and have a piece of cake, I'll bake a cake and come and talk to you, and we'll have a cup of tea together. And I have met his lovers, which change occasionally, and we've had coffee and a meal together, and I'm okay with that because we're friends. But he knows that I don't affirm the behavior. And so you can be clear with that. It's not easy, again, if it's your child or a very dear friend. But if it's a very dear friend, they understand that if it's a friend who actually means something to you, they will honor your views as you honor theirs.
And it's probably going to happen more and more for us. Another thing that's going to happen more and more, as we believe in the power of the gospel, we believe that God will bring people to salvation, and that means people who are call themselves transgendered, identify as female when they're male, same-sex attracted. How should we love a man, let's say, who has changed his sexual identity to female and comes in here to Nawi, but also claims a Christian identity too? How is it that we would love them?
Could actually be a Christian, because it very much depends where they are in this transition road. Okay, now hang in there while I say this. Let's assume you have was it a man who was a woman, or what was it?
Either way.
Let's do a hypothetical. A woman comes in here, and you sort of go, a bit of a masculine woman, and then she says, I have fully transitioned, had the surgery. I'm now a woman, I go as Mary. And so what do? The best, the most gracious and loving thing in that situation is something that I've actually heard and seen done in some churches. That is, you're a woman. Live the best woman life you can at this point, because she has completely transitioned. In fact, I was at one church in one of the country churches where they said this woman came and joined the church, and she was wonderful. She did Bible studies with the women. She was involved in the women's event. It's only in about 3 or 4 months that they realized that she was fully transitioned from male. And by that time, all the women had accepted her as a woman. And she was a wonderful, wonderful, godly woman. So, sometimes we just accept that that's happened and that's who they are. But if it is somebody who's in early transition or struggling with whether to do it, that's a hard one. Because there, it's about the relationship. Remember, I briefly told you about the woman who wanted to change, and then in the end had a hysterectomy and lived as husband and wife in an asexual relationship. That was one way they dealt with it. So what we say is minimal surgery and hormones. So minimal intervention, but in terms of the relationship they're in. Because for some people, to just say don't do anything could actually be suicidal. So we need to have a very clear psychological, psychiatric assessment, which we can't do as a church. All you can do is help them to find someone, a doctor, a psychologist, to help them to make that decision. Now, sometimes it is a sort of a voluntarism of like, I want to just do it because I want to do it. And only a psychologist can really tease that out. And so it's no easy answer there. But it's just, again, loving, walking with them, and helping them to do what's the most godly thing at that point in their life, in the context of the relationship that they are in. That's the important thing, the relationship. Are they already married? Do they have children? What's the godly thing that you can do in this situation?
Now, I've got like hundreds of questions that I want to, but I've realised there's, another 100-odd people here as well. And so we've come to the end of sort of the gender questions, but if there's more from the floor, or people would like a little bit of clarification on some of the things that Patricia's said, please feel free. I'm opening up just at this moment before I move to a couple of other more just general questions about sex and then wrap it up with some more questions that came in about porn. Are there any other questions?
Do you want to do that one on gay marriage?
We've got, if you just put your hand up nice and high, we can get a microphone to you. Where's the Roma? Yeah, just here.
You just mentioned about how to respond to a transgender Christian, but what about a Christian who's struggling with homosexuality? Would that be a different response?
Yeah, thank you for raising that. So if it is a Christian who's struggling with same-sex attraction, that's actually simpler because, not for the person, but actually as a church, because then we can talk about desires and behaviors and talk clearly about, yes, we recognize the pain of the desires, but living the life is clearly not in God's plan. And therefore, we will walk with you in dealing with that temptation, with that desire. You see, it is a deep, deep desire because we all want a good thing, and that is intimacy. We are created for intimacy. So that Wesley Hill calls it the need for spiritual friends who have walked with him. And we need to be very clear about that. It's hard because if you never, some people change by the grace of God. I have counseled some young men who have been into gay porn and then now are married with children, but they say they still have to be watching their mind because the temptations are still there. But we need to recognize that for these people, the true consummation may never happen on earth. But for one thing, you know what? Heaven is definitely going to be better than sex. So we have something to look forward to, even if we never have sex on earth. And there won't be sex in heaven. It'll still be better. And I'm a sexologist. I'll be out of a job. But then I'll be glorifying God, so it won't matter.
Any other questions? Maybe what Patricia will do in heaven. There is one more. Good, it's back. Big question for people that I think they just would appreciate your wisdom on this is how should a Christian vote when it comes to thinking about gay marriage? Okay. If there is a plebiscite, we'll have that.
Okay, here's my take on that. Firstly, we step back from same-sex marriage, gay marriage, and we refuse to accept that term, and we say what you are asking for is a redefinition of marriage. So we say, what is marriage? Marriage is biblically one man, one woman coming together with the purpose of unity, to making a family, having babies, and being a typology of Christ and His church. However, it is a lot more than just the Bible. It is social, cultural, historical. One man, one woman making a family, right? That's what marriage is. When it is anything else, it is no longer marriage. Can you see what redefinition then makes it? So we are redefining something that has always been into something that is not what it has always been. It's very difficult to find an analogy, a comparison for that. When I'm talking to younger people, I say it's like saying you make a pavlova and they say, oh no, it's a creme brulee. It can never be a creme brulee, it's a pavlova. But that's the kind of thing. You can never make marriage something that it is not. But that's what we're doing. We are redefining marriage. So, when you redefine marriage to say same-sex marriage is acceptable, because it's about love, it's not about commitment and other focused caring, but it's about love. So if it is only about love, where are you going to draw the line? What about groups of people who live together? It's called polyamory, it's not polygamy. Polyamory is where groups of people live together in committed relationships. And the polyamory Australia groups are clearly saying, you know, look, great, we can get married. There is what we call genetic sexual attraction. This is where members of the family feel sexually attracted to each other. And there are genetic sexual attraction groups in Australia who are saying, well, great, now we can get married. We won't have children, but we can get married. Where do you draw the line once you redefine something that biblically, historically, socially, culturally has been a particular thing? So I won't say how I'm going to
Okay, good. I was going to say, because that's how we step back. And so then for that reason, we then need to make a decision based on thinking that this is not so much voting for marriage, but a redefinition of what marriage is. We've got a few questions that are more general when it comes to sex. And the first one is lust, because you talked about the difference earlier. Is lust for your husband or wife a selfish or wrong desire? Lust.
That's a very good question, because what is lust? If it is desire for your husband or wife, yes, by all means. And if that's what definition of lust is, yes. But if it is something that says, I want to use you for my personal pleasure, and if that is the definition of lust, yes, it is wrong. Because marriage is about looking at your spouse. 1 Corinthians chapter 7 says, your wife, your body is your husband's husband, his body is yours. So marriage, love and sex in marriage is about looking at your partner and saying, what can I do to make this the best for you? And let me assure you, when two people look at each other and say, what can I do for you to make, not just sex, anything, the best for you, both are going to have fun. And we have a whole set of activities in the book called Sensuality activities that plays on that theme. So if you've got really good sex, you should try that one out.
That's Best Sex for Life. That
Best
book.
Sex for Life.
Up the back. Can try it tonight. What is your definition of sexual intercourse? And with this, I'll weave a couple of questions on porn as well, because with that in mind, what are the implications for the brain when we think about that? Because you talked about any sort of sexual intercourse. What about masturbation without using pornography? How does that have an impact there when we particularly think too about what your definition of sexual intercourse is?
Well, sexual intercourse by definition is penis in vagina. However, in research now, especially with young people, they say, when did you first have sexual intercourse or whatever, within brackets, anal or vaginal. It's a really weird way to put it, because this assumes that a lot of young people have anal sex. So, sexual intercourse by definition is penis in vagina. Now, masturbation, are you got more questions today? Because normally what happens is, every time I do a talk, masturbation is the end question. So, I mean, if I'm asked masturbation, I'm like waiting for Brett to say, and that we don't have time for anymore. But anyway, let's talk masturbation. So
we've basically got just time for this question.
There you are. We always end on masturbation. So
no, there's three more. Okay. But we'll see how we go.
Okay, masturbation basically is touching your genitals because it feels good. So as we said, doesn't feel good to rub your nose, so we don't. So it's not the act that is the problem. The problem is that it's hard to do that without thinking sexual thoughts. Now I know there's people who say they can think of a sunset or the wind through the gum trees and they can masturbate. Dolphins, dinosaurs, and I've
actually had somebody say that, yeah.
Yeah, you can. But that's the rare thing. Most people, when they masturbate, think sexual thoughts. That's what we call the lustful thoughts. Now we need to be clear here, especially when we are talking to children, that desire, just that fleeting desire of looking at a body and saying, oh, cute, that's not the lust. The lust is when you, because that's the way we are created. We are created to look at a good-looking man or woman and go, nice creation. But beyond that, when you think of that nice creation and then go home and masturbate and build a lustful fantasy around what you and that nice creation could do, that is the lustful fantasy. And that is what becomes a sin, as Jesus clearly said. Same as having sex with that person. Because what are you doing? You're wiring those thoughts into your brain. Now, therefore, masturbation tied in with those lustful fantasies can become very habit-forming. Because what are you doing? You're getting those nice sex circuits working. And therefore, it can become habit-forming, so that after a while, if you get into that habit, you can't sleep, you masturbate, you're sleepy, you masturbate, you had a fight with your wife, you masturbate, your boss didn't do something, you masturbate, whatever. It becomes like taking a Panadol. And that can become, a habitual thing, and we need to be careful. So those are the problems. And if you're married, and then masturbation, because it's a solo act, it becomes a selfish act, and we need to be careful about it. It's like, especially for women, he doesn't know, he needs a roadmap to find anything. I'll just masturbate and then just lie there and think of, I don't know, England or Sri Lanka or whatever.
And that's all no, we're not going to end on that. We will not end on that. I'm going to ask this, probably just one of these last two. Mm-hmm. When it comes to people who have become addicted to porn, or those desires, it might not necessarily be porn, it might just be stimulation of a sexual kind. How do you, and they want to rebalance that biochemistry, do you recommend that they have then total abstinence from sex? Can they have good sex? How does that work for somebody who does struggle with that? Because they may be concerned that when they do have sex, they'll be thinking about these other things and not their wife or their husband.
It's a very good question. There's two sides to working with pornography, anyone who's compulsive porn user or addict or whatever you define it. And if anyone, I'll say it first before I forget, that if anyone actually would like more information, send me an email, because I have like a 2-pager, one for singles, one for marrieds, just on ways you can work through it. Two sides to it. One is you need to get your brain out of porn habit. So you need to set those accountability software and all that in, and then get someone to walk with you who's your accountability person, whom you can talk to. And it must not be your spouse. Your spouse can't be your policeman or your policewoman. So you need somebody from a friend, and preferably 2 or 3, who can be there for you. That is the porn. But meanwhile, you've got to be building good circuits in your brain. And those good circuits are the intimacy circuits with your spouse. So we take it slow. You don't abstain from sex. You might abstain from intercourse for a while you build up your intimacy. Never fall for the thing that intimacy equals intercourse. You can be very intimate without having intercourse. Trust me, I'm a sexologist. If you think that any sexual intimacy is intercourse, I'm going to give you an exercise to do. If that's what your brain was saying, go home today, get naked and stand in front of the mirror and figure out how much of your body is really genitals. Not a lot. Turn around, nothing. So very little. So you need intimacy, means learning to enjoy each other's body again. And what we ask porn, people are working through porn, especially if they're in, because remember, if one spouse has been watching porn, the partner is feeling rejected and angry. So you need rebuilding from both. So we say, no, leave the intercourse and build intimacy. So don't avoid sex, but just keep the intimacy building going, and sex will happen.
I'm going to ask, this is going to be our last question, unless there's anybody that's got something really desperate they want to ask, in which case send it through. And also, actually, no, there's another good one on there. No, we'll make this the last one. And also, do feel free to contact Patricia with those extra questions, or you can ask through anybody here at the church, myself, and through the care cards if you'd like to, because that's where it's been going. So feel free to do that. But I think it is important to ask this question. What would your comments be about or around the Safe Schools program?
Safe Schools is dangerous. Safe Schools originally was created with a good intent, because it was meant to be anti-bullying. And nobody wants to bully. I mean, nobody wants to be bullied because they're different. I mean, you should be bullying me. I'm brown, and and I don't like being bullied because I'm brown. So nobody wants to bully someone, and we don't want children bullied. So because children who are gay or lesbian or transgendered and different being bullied is wrong. So that's how it was created. But the way it is being twisted into is the fact that children are being told that you are not what you, one of the programs say, not your wibbly wobbly bits between your legs. You are not your your biology, but you are whatever your brain tells you. One of the youth workers in one of the churches contacted me, and he said, year 6 kid came and told him that in school they were told that you can decide whoever you want to be. Now remember, malleable neuroplastic brains. And you can think whatever you want, and that is who you are. And one little kid put her hand up and think, what if I think I'm a robot? And the teacher had said, well, yes, that's a very valid thing that you can think about, that you're a robot. Because you are whatever your brain thinks you are. See, this is the malleability of a child's brain. I have young people talking about what they call kin gender. Kin gender means you don't even have to think that you're human. You can be a cat. And then you have a cat gender. So are you a female cat or a male cat? So you can be whatever your brain. And so we are training young brains to this. And so therefore, as parents, we need to be talking to our children very clearly, and we need to be unafraid to go to our schools and say, I don't approve of this. I think we should do that. We should be writing letters, we should be talking to our schools and saying, I don't want our children doing this.
And it's difficult because a lot of us probably feel quite uncomfortable with being that overt about it. But it's clear from your research and your understanding of this that it will be an unhelpful thing.
And talk to your parliamentarians. Write letters to your parliamentarians. Because Victoria is big time going down that way. And it will come here if you're not very soon.
We're going to wrap it up there. And one thing I did want to stress tonight, if anything tonight has made you feel uncomfortable, if anything tonight has made you have even more questions again that you can't ask here because you want to ask personally, please contact us. You can contact us through those numbers and the email address. You can come and see me personally, Ange personally, even Patricia tonight would be more than happy. You would be more than happy for people to come and speak to her.
I'm more than happy.
Exactly. We don't want the conversation to end here. We don't want tonight just to be a great night here and a lot of fun because Patricia's fantastic, but it continues in how we then conduct ourselves as Christians in this world, seeking to live lives of truth and love. We would also love it if you'd give us your feedback. If you are able to, you can leave a care card. The response cards are up the back, or you can text in just saying how you found tonight, what you would have appreciated to hear more of or less of, or how it is that it changed some of the things that you're thinking. We would love to hear your feedback to know then how it is we can continue to support you in living these lives in this worldview of so many different regimes and ideas, and it's very complex. And so we want to continue to be able to support you as our people living out the Christian faith in this world. But to finish, I think we need to give a very, very big thank you to Patricia.
Thank you. Thank you.